Imagine this, a world on the brink, where two of the most powerful nations on Earth stand unrestrained, nuclear arsenals unchecked, the rules that once held them in check fading into history. This is not a scenario from a thriller novel. This is happening right now. On Thursday, the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, known as START, will officially expire, a treaty signed in 2010 by President Barack Obama and Russian President Dmitry Medvedev, implemented in 2011, designed to limit nuclear warheads, now stands at the edge of oblivion. Extended in 2021 for 5 years, it was supposed to offer stability, a framework that kept the world's deadliest weapons under a measure of control. But today, that framework is gone, or at least it could be. Sources close to the Kremlin reveal that President Vladimir Putin proposed a 12-month extension to the treaty, an offer aimed at keeping the lines of communication open, at least on nuclear restraint. But according to intelligence reports, the United States provided no official response. The silence speaks volumes. While the Biden administration has not formally rejected the proposal, this lack of engagement, when placed alongside former President Donald Trump's outright rejection earlier this year, signals a dangerous erosion of the very structures that once prevented catastrophe. In the absence of START, Russia now faces no treaty-imposed limits on its nuclear forces. Kremlin insiders confirm that Moscow is prepared to operate without restriction, treating its strategic arsenal as fully deployable. Dmitry Peskov, the Russian presidential spokesman, has publicly warned that the world is approaching a period of unprecedented peril. If the treaty is not extended, in a matter of days, humanity will face one of the most dangerous chapters in history, Peskov said in a briefing that analysts are calling alarmingly candid. The concern is not just Moscow's rhetoric. The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres echoed similar warnings. In a statement released from UN headquarters in New York, Guterres described the expiration as a serious moment for global peace, noting that for the first time in over 50 years, the world will lack a functioning nuclear arms control agreement between its two largest nuclear powers. He urged both Washington and Moscow to return to the negotiation table, not simply to preserve peace, but to design a new modern framework for nuclear restraint in a conflict-weary world. But what does this mean on the ground? Analysts tracking Russian military movements report increased activity at several strategic missile sites across the country. Satellite images reviewed by independent observers indicate troop rotations near ICBM silos, unusual supply convoys, and what some intelligence sources are calling operational readiness drills near nuclear facilities. While Moscow describes these as routine exercises, experts warn that timing and scale suggest more than routine training. It may be a deliberate show of strength in a world suddenly without treaty limits. In Washington, officials are reportedly in internal panic. Sources familiar with Department of Defense briefings indicate that contingency planning has been accelerated, with military staff running simulations for scenarios once considered highly unlikely. One retired official, speaking on background, described the atmosphere in the Pentagon as a growing sense of unease, the kind that comes when checks and balances suddenly vanish. Analysts note that the risk of miscalculation rises exponentially when treaties expire quietly, without fanfare, leaving both sides guessing at the other's intentions. Across media outlets, speculation is mounting. Headlines in Moscow and New York suggest a potential new nuclear era. Intelligence experts are pointing to leaks that indicate a broader pattern of disruption, from cyber attacks to strategic missile alerts, as each side tests the other's thresholds. Reports indicate that Russian generals have debated preemptive posture adjustments over the past month, a phrase that has set alarm bells ringing in European capitals. Meanwhile, unnamed U.S. intelligence sources warn that Moscow may be considering partial deployments that were previously off limits under the treaty. The sense of urgency is palpable. The stakes are not merely theoretical. Citizens in capitals like Moscow, Washington, and Berlin are reporting unusual civil activity. In some Russian cities, local media suggest increased civil defense drills, emergency preparedness messaging, and even panic buying. Sources on the ground report that employees at strategic facilities have been ordered to extended shifts, with rumors circulating of temporary housing near key sites. Analysts warn that such movements, combined with high-level military posturing, signal an internal acknowledgement. Russia is preparing for a world without the START safety net. International reactions have been swift. European leaders have issued coordinated statements, calling for renewed dialogue. NATO officials, speaking off the record, described the situation as tense but manageable, though internal memos suggest growing concern over Russian readiness levels and the lack of transparency from Moscow. Meanwhile, UN security analysts caution that the absence of a controlling framework could trigger a chain reaction, with other nuclear states reevaluating their own posture. We are at a point where proliferation incentives increase, one analyst warned. When the two largest arsenals go unchecked, the ripple effects are immediate. Inside Russia, the political atmosphere is equally fraught. Reports indicate internal debates among military and political elites over whether to adopt an assertive nuclear posture or maintain a defensive stance. Some intelligence sources reveal that discussions are taking place at the highest levels, including security councils and strategic planning committees, weighing potential preemptive moves against perceived threats from NATO. Leaks suggest a tense divide. Hawks argue that without START, Moscow must demonstrate capability and resolve, while moderates warn that even minor miscalculations could spiral into global catastrophe. Meanwhile, in the United States, officials are coordinating behind closed doors. Intelligence agencies have reportedly briefed congressional leaders on the potential risks, emphasizing that the treaty's expiration could embolden Russia's nuclear strategy. There are discussions about revisiting modernized arms agreements, but experts note a critical obstacle: trust, or rather, the lack of it. Sources indicate that prior tensions between administrations, dating back to the Trump era, have left lingering gaps in coordination. In short, the clock is ticking, and diplomatic inertia could prove deadly. The media has begun to catch the thread of this unfolding story. Analysts highlight that social media chatter, including unofficial leaks and deleted statements, suggest rising unease among military ranks in both nations. One European intelligence bulletin obtained by reporters warns that morale within certain strategic units may be fraying. Panic, defection, and cautious whispers of internal collapse are reportedly circulating. While these reports cannot be independently verified, the accumulation of signals points to a destabilizing psychological effect: uncertainty about how quickly the other side might act in a treatyless world. Already, there are early signs of international isolation pressures. Countries with nuclear ambitions are reportedly watching the US-Russia dynamic closely. Analysts suggest that the absence of START could reignite global nuclear debates, with some nations fast-tracking modernization programs. UN briefings hint at emergency meetings scheduled in Vienna and Geneva, aimed at discussing potential frameworks to prevent escalation, but diplomats acknowledge the difficulty. Without the two superpowers at the table, meaningful agreements may be impossible. Intelligence reports also suggest possible contingency planning for military strikes. Sources close to NATO military channels indicate that exercises are being run to model worst-case scenarios, including partial or targeted nuclear deployments. While these are simulations, the existence of such planning indicates an acknowledgement that treaty expiration is not a benign event. Even a small miscalculation, an unannounced test, a cyber breach, or a misread warning could trigger a response neither side can easily control. Observers in Moscow note that Putin's public statements, while measured, carry hidden warnings. Officials say that phrases like "no restrictions" and "world will face one of the most dangerous chapters" are carefully crafted messages to both internal and external audiences, a combination of signaling, intimidation, and preparation. Analysts believe this is a deliberate psychological strategy intended to convey resolve while gauging international and domestic reactions. Across Washington, there is a quiet but growing sense that the unthinkable may be possible. Sources within the National Security Council reveal that emergency scenario planning is underway, including reassessments of nuclear deterrence posture and command control communications. Reports indicate that senior officials are weighing options ranging from renewed bilateral talks to rapid strategic force modernization. Every move is shadowed by uncertainty, every delay amplifying the risk of miscalculation, and the world is watching. Europe's capitals, Asia's strategic hubs, and even smaller nuclear-capable nations are observing carefully, adjusting their own postures in response. Intelligence sources confirm that cyber networks, satellite reconnaissance, and signal intercepts are operating at peak alert. Analysts note that this is the first time in decades that global military intelligence is functioning under such high tension, without the stabilizing framework of a binding treaty. Meanwhile, citizens in Moscow and Washington alike are responding in subtle but telling ways. Social media chatter, reports of emergency drills, and visible troop movements hint at an unspoken anxiety. Former intelligence officials warn that public perception itself can become a tool or a hazard. Panic in the population may push leaders to adopt more aggressive postures to demonstrate control, while fear among military units could erode discipline and increase the risk of accidental escalation. Analysts point out that history rarely gives humanity second chances when structural safeguards crumble. The START Treaty, despite its limitations, was a cornerstone of global stability. Without it, every decision, every alert, every misinterpreted signal carries magnified consequences. Intelligence leaks suggest that both Moscow and Washington are painfully aware of this reality, yet options appear increasingly constrained, and the diplomatic space to maneuver is shrinking by the hour. Adding another layer of complexity, unnamed sources indicate that internal debates within Russia may be feeding the narrative of impending crisis. Reports hint at divisions between political elites, military planners, and intelligence officers, each with their own view of acceptable risk. Some documents, partially leaked to Western media, suggest that the Kremlin is considering accelerated deployment schedules for certain missile systems, which, if executed, would drastically alter the strategic balance in Europe. In Washington, parallel discussions reveal similar fractures. While senior policymakers aim for careful diplomacy, pressure is mounting from defense hawks, think tanks, and congressional leaders demanding a show of strength. Analysts note that this push-pull between restraint and demonstration increases the probability of missteps. Every decision is now under intense scrutiny, not only by domestic audiences, but by global intelligence communities actively interpreting every signal from both capitals. European and Asian intelligence services report rising levels of concern. NATO's confidential briefings, reviewed by reporters, indicate heightened operational awareness near Russian borders. Satellite reconnaissance confirms the movement of strategic assets, while cyber monitoring suggests unusual activity targeting military communications. Sources suggest that even minor incidents, such as misrouted signals or erroneous alerts, could escalate faster than anyone expects. UN Secretary General Guterres' warnings underscore the severity. His calls for a new arms control framework are urgent, not optional. Analysts point out that without coordinated global action, the expiration of START represents more than a treaty lapse. It signifies a vacuum, one that could be exploited by nations seeking leverage, by rogue elements seeking disruption, or by accident. The risk is not hypothetical, it is imminent. Military planning documents leaked from unnamed sources indicate contingency strategies ranging from rapid alert protocols to targeted deployments in specific regions. While official statements downplay these, intelligence analysts warn that the very existence of such planning increases the probability of accidents. In environments of extreme uncertainty, even routine exercises can be misread as offensive maneuvers, and the consequences can be catastrophic. The psychological dimension is striking. Reports from Europe suggest rising unease among civilian populations. Panic buying, social media speculation, and emergency drills are spreading. Even in the absence of overt conflict, these behaviors amplify tension, influencing decision-making at the highest levels. Analysts describe this as a feedback loop. Uncertainty breeds caution, but also encourages precautionary aggression, a dangerous combination when nuclear arsenals are involved. Sources close to the Kremlin note that the messaging strategy is deliberate. Phrases like "no restrictions" and warnings of history's most dangerous moments are designed to convey both capability and resolve while testing the West's response. Intelligence experts warn that this form of strategic signaling can quickly become destabilizing if misinterpreted. A single ambiguous message or a deleted statement could set off alarms across multiple capitals. Across the United States, analysts point to a troubling lack of clarity in Washington's approach. While diplomatic channels exist, sources indicate that responses are delayed, cautious, or opaque. The combination of treaty expiration, military readiness adjustments, and strategic signaling creates a perfect storm. Experts warn that in this context, miscalculation is not just possible, it is increasingly probable. Globally, nations are watching, reacting, and adjusting. European powers are reassessing defense postures. Asian allies are evaluating strategic options. Even non-aligned nations with nuclear capabilities are taking note. Intelligence sources confirm that the expiration of START is prompting a cascade of policy discussions, threat assessments, and contingency planning far beyond Moscow and Washington. The world is shifting under our feet faster than most realize. Reports from media outlets combined with independent intelligence assessments reveal early signs of strain within Russia's own systems. Delays in coordination, conflicting orders, and internal debates about the appropriate posture for strategic forces are beginning to surface. Analysts warn that such friction, if amplified, can increase the risk of operational mistakes. Similarly, in Washington, competing priorities between diplomacy, defense, and domestic politics are creating their own forms of inertia, leaving decision makers with fewer options than they might wish. The cumulative picture is sobering. The expiration of START, once a technical treaty, has now become a flashpoint. Intelligence reports, military readiness indicators, and political analyses all point to a dangerous moment, one where small errors, delayed responses, or miscommunications could escalate rapidly. The world is on a knife's edge, and every observer, from capitals to remote intelligence outposts, is holding their breath. Analysts warn that the combination of internal panic, military preparedness, and the absence of treaty constraints could trigger a cascade effect. Satellite evidence shows increased alert levels. Human intelligence sources suggest heightened security protocols. Leaked documents indicate that some units may be testing readiness beyond previously authorized limits. Every signal, every movement is scrutinized with the implicit understanding one wrong interpretation, one delayed response could be catastrophic. In addition, there are indications of potential defection or dissent within strategic units. Sources in Moscow and Washington hint at officers quietly questioning orders, debating ethics, or seeking clarification on protocol in a suddenly unregulated environment. While these reports cannot be independently verified, the pattern fits historical precedents. When treaties collapse, human behavior can become as unpredictable as the machines themselves. International reactions are accelerating. Calls for emergency UN meetings, special sessions in the European Parliament, and diplomatic outreach from Asia signal that the global community recognizes the magnitude of the threat. Yet without direct engagement from Washington and Moscow, these initiatives may be too little, too late. Analysts caution that the clock is ticking, that every hour without communication raises the stakes. Intelligence suggests that military planning is no longer theoretical. Exercises in Europe, Asia, and the Arctic region indicate operational readiness for rapid deployment, strike coordination, and contingency operations. Even routine drills are now interpreted as high-alert maneuvers. Analysts warn that in the absence of START, every movement carries symbolic weight, every misstep has global implications, and the potential for miscalculation grows exponentially. Media reports, both traditional and social, highlight a growing sense of crisis. Deleted statements from Russian officials, leaked U.S. internal memos, and intelligence briefings collectively paint a picture of a world unmoored from established constraints. Analysts warn that this is not merely political posturing. It is a warning that systems, both technical and human, are operating under extreme stress. At this moment, the sum of all factors, treaty expiration, military readiness, internal divisions, international isolation, intelligence leaks, creates a climate of unprecedented tension. Experts emphasize that the situation is volatile, dynamic, and fraught with risk. Every day that passes without clear communication increases the probability of a crisis, accidental or otherwise. In summary, the expiration of START is not just a legal or diplomatic milestone. It is a seismic shift in global security, an inflection point where decades of nuclear restraint are suddenly in doubt. Analysts warn that the absence of constraints, combined with internal instability, military readiness maneuvers, and fractured communication, creates a perilous environment. The world is now watching a high-stakes strategic game where the smallest move could have catastrophic consequences. As the hours count down to the treaty's official expiration, one truth is undeniable. The frameworks that once held back humanity's deadliest weapons are eroding. The signals are clear, the warnings dire, and the possibilities grim. Every observer, Every intelligence analyst, every leader understands that we are standing at the edge of history. Something major is coming.